Welcome to another recorded live event supporting our most recent Living Resilience Introductory Course, Collateral Beauty. This course, designed to challenge and resource both newcomers and the very experienced in the collapse-aware and collapse-acceptant communities. Each recording in this series is from either the Saturday or Tuesday online Zoom gatherings intended to deepen an embodied and shared experience of this inner work of collapse in the course called Collateral Beauty. Hey there. I'm Dean Walker, and I'm the founder of a small organization here on the interwebs called Living Resilience. And this is session 6 of 6 in a 6-week long introductory course here in Living Resilience. And the course is called Collateral Beauty, the Inner Work of Collapse. And what makes this particular course and this time unusual and hopefully valuable is that this introductory course, which is usually on demand and recordings only, still is mostly that. But we're also offering 2 weekly live group practice sessions for each week of the course. So there's one on Tuesdays and one on Thursdays, excuse me. There's one on Tuesdays and there's one on Saturdays. This is the last of the series of Saturday group practice sessions. So, I'm very pleased that this particular way of structuring the course has given me a lot of flexibility to add, change elements of each week's course material. And I have some very exciting things to mention about this last week and this last section. There are some very big changes, and I hope you'll find them as useful and intriguing as I have. So today will be a little bit different. We're going to be going straight into a couple of video clips from people who have been around certainly for decades, but in terms of a particular kind of exploration in this collapse-aware and collapse-acceptant community or world or conversation around the world. There's a particular portion of it called sense making. And the way we make sense of sense making here, if we define it here, is for those of you who have been diving into this material, it's each week is kind of just putting your toe into the water of one small segment of the course and of the body of work, but it gives you a taste of each stage of the path in this introductory way. The actual model we use, you now are very familiar with, called Paul Chefurka's Stages of Awareness. And that, of course, starts us in the business as usual framing and world and experience, where most people, well, all of us are born into, and all of us are saturated in from birth on. And if a person just stays there, which most people will, that will be the bulk of the population. They will not engage in conversations like this or courses like this. And they will go to the end of their days with that as their saturated reality. It's extraordinarily difficult to come up with any new, novel, truly transformative, different ways of being, relating, thinking if one is just staying in that saturated state of business as usual. With each progressive step, approximately 5 stages of awareness that Paul Chefurka takes us through, he takes us to more and more systemic um, framing and a systemic way of experiencing this web of life that we're in. So that's what the simplicity of his model introduces us to. What we bring from living resilience is that at each stage of awareness, there's a large menu of support and content and most importantly practices that a person can engage with. They can, first choose which practices they want to be doing, and then they can dive in and adjust their practices and adjust their way of interacting with this material and these times as they go up into each progressive stage of awareness. So you'll recall that the initial practices that were suggested in the first couple of segments of this, weekly segments of this course material, we could call that first aid level resilience, where something gets our attention and lets us know things are not okay in our world. Things are demanding a different kind of attention. That might mean, usually at this level of world experience of this stage, is something like a huge weather event. It could be a hurricane or a flood or a fire or a drought or we've all watched the news and we know it's happening quite a bit more frequently than ever before. And there is nothing quite as attention getting than, for instance, you find yourself sleeping on the floor of the local high school gym with 50 other families uh, after your neighborhood, your city, your region has been devastated by a hurricane. So that's the nature of this first aid level resilience, and it's very basic, but it is absolutely critical, meaning it is necessary knowledge to have, but virtually none of us are trained in this from in our family and school and so on. And what I've noticed also is that it's not particularly sexy. It's not the 5 life hacks to be successful or something. But if you'll just recall and look at your own experience of, hopefully you practiced a little bit out of those early weekly sections of the course. Hopefully you found those useful, and hopefully you were able to perhaps share those skills with those you love, and perhaps you've already got your own set of self-regulation and co-regulation skills. But that's the suggestion in the early segments of Paul Chefurka's model and also of our work here, is to get a pocket full of those kind of self-regulation and co-regulation practices that you can just pull out as needed, because that's kind of how those things go. When you least expect it, life can take us off center, and this is a way we can learn to bring ourselves back. So the next phase of following Paul Chefurka's model is to take us into practices of reconnection and practices of reclaiming center. And just a brief review, which you'll probably remember from those early sections of the course, we assert that what got us here is that we forfeited our center, our individual and our collective center. And the end result of that forfeiture of center is that we are disconnected from the primary sources of meaning and relationship in human life. just for ease of talking about it, we've broken it down into we've disconnected from deeper self, from other people, from earth, and from soul. So that's the nature of what those practices are that you'll hear us time and time again talking about practices. Each week in the course, there are a few suggested practices for you to just try them on, see if they fit for you. One way that you're going to find if they are fit for you is you may take on one of the earlier practices of journaling and conversation prompts for your life, for your daily life. Hopefully you are doing some journaling and that you are engaging with creating some of your own prompts, and as well as using the ones that we've supplied. For many people who engage with this work, this is where the rubber meets the road. This takes work. This is not the 5 life hacks to do by the end of each day or something. This is the real deal work to be able to discover what matters most to you, and to be able to start to explore, okay, what are some of the things that I need to learn in order to be able to be more of service to my family. If I've just chosen, yeah, what matters most to me is that I can be of service to my family. What matters most to me is that I want to be able to be present the next time something big scale like this happens. I want to have more ability to stay present, and I want to have more ability to self-regulate, to co-regulate. I want to be able to bring myself back to center volitionally. So these are just a small example, few simple ways that people can choose for themselves what matters most to me. And given that's what matters most to me, what are the practices? What are the courses? What are the kinds of interactions that I want to have? What are the qualities of the circle that I want to sit in to be able to have a cadre of other people who are doing their work over there. They've got what matters most to them. They've got their practices. And there is nothing more potent than sitting in circle together with people who have done that, people who bring that. Here in the 6th and final introductory session of this introductory course, it's no exception to the relatively light treatment that you're going to get here. Many of you have been in this kind of work, and certainly in this collapse aware and collapse acceptant conversation for years or even decades. But we invite you to try and make this as valuable for you as it can be for someone who's brand new here. And I think you're going to find that there are, at every one of the stages of awareness, every one of the 6 sections of the course, we intend for you to be able to find embodied practices that could be new and useful. We, of course, will have the core curriculum, 1 or 2 of the videos usually, that are really at the center of this week's work. We also hope that you are, in each week, diving into some of the beauty of collateral beauty. And again, hopefully you know by now, there's poetry, songs, music, sing-along songs, which are just gorgeous. One of my favorite parts. Uh, Art videos and some remarkably valuable articles as well. One last mention about the content that's built in here is beyond those 6 weekly sections of course material. You'll scroll down and you'll see that there are some deep dive additional sections. So if you're interested in a deep dive into any of the topics of this course, a good chance you'll find some solid material that could be of use and interest to you. Here in this 6th session, remember I mentioned that I've got some big changes going on in this course. I mean, it's not that old a course, and I'm really feeling very free to change it at will. I'm very excited about this most recent change. I'll be moving a lovely, powerful interview between two of the strongest bodies of work creators in the field today. One is specifically focused on the world of trauma and how it shows up in our systems individually and collectively. And he is offering programs around the world and at scale to have people be able to generate relationships with one another, circle environments with one another, workshop environments with one another, learning environments, to be able to become far more able to identify, discern, heal, and facilitate with one another the dispersion of trauma from our systems, from our bodies, and from our relationships. That's Thomas Hubel. And the other person in that interview is Francis Weller, who is a mentor of mine. And I just deeply respect his work in soul work and grief work. If those sound like foreign terms, I would recommend highly just dive into that conversation, that interview with Thomas and Francis. You'll find that now in one of the deep dive sections after these main six. And so now I'm going to tell you just a little bit about this section right now, what I'm explaining to you here, what we're going to be looking at and experiencing in this session. And then also how that impacts the coursework, the core coursework of this, the final section of the course. So I'm going to be offering you two relatively brief video clips, one from Daniel Schmachtenberger and another one from a man named Zak Stein. Schmachtenberger and Stein both have been working a tremendous amount in what's called a sense-making space. And to couch this in terms of, remember I was saying that we assert that what has gotten us into this self-terminating predicament is that we've forfeited our center. And it's actually just a little bit more detailed than that. What we would assert is that it can be seen that we have not just one physical center, but we actually have a number of centers that can coincide with the different core components of our being alive in a body, and what we call us, what I call me. So there are a number of centers, a number of bodies within this body. So I hope you'll just go along with me for the moment with this jargon. I find it quite easy to speak about these different aspects that are going on inside of here, these different bodies within my body, and then the centers within each of those bodies. So let me give you an example. In sense making could be seen as recovering center in the mental body. Recovering center in the mental body gives us more agility at making sense of this world. Instead of being swirling with the fire hose of content that is bombarding us every moment of every day, we can come to a place of more clarity. We can desaturate from that fire hose to some degree, and we can start to have some space. We can start to learn some sense-making skills. This is possible to do, and this is another one of those pieces that takes work. This is practice. So both Daniel Schmachtenberger and Zak Stein are really heavy hitters in this environment of this space of sense making. I encountered them both about 5+ years ago now when a group out of the UK called Rebel Wisdom was really making it known this conversation, this collective conversation called sense making. And they were prominent characters in those Rebel Wisdom presentations. So I'm presenting these two characters this time in these two brief clips in this session to give you a bit of practice in starting to spread out this. What is this exploration of sense making? You may already be involved with this in a big way in your world, in whatever aspect of life that it matters most to you. You may already be very much engaged with sense making in those pockets of your world. I'm very much starting at the beginning with both of these. Now, beginning meaning they're offering a few, a digestible amount of their extensive body of work. Both of these people have extensive, huge bodies of work. And in both, these are just brief clips, brief segments, brief tastes of their work. And so I would invite you to have your journal ready, be ready to start to write yourself some prompts for exploration, either journaling prompts or conversation prompts. And let's start with Daniel Schmachtenberger, about a 6-minute video produced by Before School content creator on YouTube. So I hope you find this useful. Hope you get some prompts generated, and I'll be right back after that to speak with you a little bit before the Zak Stein clip.
People who haven't spent a lot of time in deep wilderness mostly don't know how much happier they would be if they were. Mostly don't know how many of their pains and illnesses and psychological disorders would go away, how much of the striving is actually a result of emptiness from living in an environment in which we don't have intimate relationships with other people in nature. If you spend time with a indigenous culture and see how much more they understand the language of all the animals, most people aren't aware of how impoverished their life is, that they don't know how to communicate to the animals, that they don't know what the whole world around them is saying all the time, and that their mind is never still and quiet. So it's hard to feel bad about missing something you've never experienced and you don't know exists. Also, when the addict is coming down, they don't want happiness. They want a hit of the supply, right? If somebody's coming down on heroin, they don't want to see a beautiful sunset. They don't want a deep conversation with a friend. Everything else is meaningless because they have created a hypernormal stimuli that allows them to only get happiness from a very narrow thing. It's actually deadened their ability to get happiness from lots of things. So there are reward circuits in us that are more addictive. There are other reward circuits that are not addictive, that are more actually so the addictive reward circuit will give you a very quick spike, and then it will drop you. And then that makes a craving for another spike. And obviously sugar does this, and likes on social media do this, and using filters to look more beautiful than you are does this, and etc. Most of the things in our world do some version of this. And then in the low, then you crave more of that thing. And so you get, of course, more bipolar type experience, but you also get an erosion of your baseline over time. There's less and less things that make you happy. You more and more need those stimulus, and you need larger amounts of them. The types of reward circuits that lead to psychologically, physiologically healthy people are ones that don't give you as much spike as quickly, but raise your baseline over time. And so the type of reward you get from exercising, the type of reward you get from like meaningful conversation with friends, from helping somebody, from time in nature, you get reward circuits from those things, but they're different in kind than the reward circuits you get from fast food or from porn or from social media or those other things. But it's very hard to monetize those things on the supply side. It's very hard to sell you any of the things that on your deathbed you will say are what you wish you had spent all of your time with. Every person on their deathbed says, I wish I had spent more time with my family and with my kids and with the people that I loved, and telling them that I loved them, and working less and pursuing things less. And none of the hits that they were spending their life pursuing are at all meaningful in those reflections. But because the supply side can basically market to the addictive impulse better, and it's important to understand that, like, from a business perspective, especially once you have a fiduciary responsibility to maximize shareholder profit, you're like legally bound to that as a director of a public corporation. One of the core goals is maximize the lifetime revenue of a customer. And addiction is awesome for lifetime revenue of a customer. So when you look at the emergence of fast food and processed foods, whether we're talking about Hostesses and Twinkies or candies or Coke or McDonald's, they're basically combinations of salt, fat, and sugar, different combinations of that with different texture profiles that were actually scientifically optimized to maximize addiction. There were lots of split tests done to see which ones had the people crave them the most again. Yet the reason that people in an evolutionary environment, the reason that things that had salt and fat and sugar gave people more of a kind of dopamine hit was because in an evolutionary environment, pre-agriculture, those things were very rare. It was hard to get much of them. And so if you got them, there was an incentive to go find the things that were evolutionarily rare and that were useful. As soon as we make them hyper abundant, then people are dying of the excess of them. We've built a world we're not actually genetically fit to, and then exploit the weakness of that rather than try to support people to navigate it well. But it's also that those nutrients were bound with vitamins and minerals and a lot of other nutrients simultaneously. So the fast food removes all the micronutrients, optimizes those things, optimizes addiction. And so you can have people who are actually dying of malnutrition while they're obese because they're so deficient in micronutrients. And so what fast food is to food, where you just take the maximally addictive part and strip out why we were even attracted to it in an evolutionary environment, strip out all of what's good in it, is also what social media relationships are to human relationships, is also what porn is to human intimacy, is also what the news is to the desire to understand the world you live in, is what productivity is relative to meaning, right? Stripping out a very narrow, aligned with the interest of the market hit that still has that same thing, then you will feel a need for greater and greater productivity. And of course, that is great from a GDP maximizing perspective and not great from a deathbed reflections or the quality of how children are raised or the quality of the environment perspective.
All right. Welcome back from Daniel Schmachtenberger's brief introduction to a portion of his work. I hope you found that useful. And yeah, I don't know what else to say, but that I don't, it doesn't look good for anyone in this world who isn't taking some amount of time to create this kind of discerned learning and discerned processing, mental processing about what's going on, and to learn discernment with regard to how to have conversations, how to take in media, take in news, take in an information or data, and be able to discern how real is this, how verified is this, how solid is this information, and so on. So let's move on to this next conversation with Zak Stein. Is an interview with one of the most prolific current day podcasters and content producers in terms of really sense making on the scale of what is it that we're up to in this world. And he starts from his expertise, which starts from a tremendous amount of knowledge about energy systems, energy, how much energy we use, how our economy is a function of energy, and on that way. Which leads me to mention his other expertise that he brings in primarily is some experience in the financial markets as one of his first jobs in the world. And so he has some acumen, some expertise, and some familiarity from both of those fields that he brings to his incredibly prolific number of not only interviews with his expert guests, but also with the other kinds of material that he kind of produces in parallel. This person is Nate Hagens, by the way, and his podcast is called The Great Simplification. And so this is a couple of very bright people. They know each other very well. They have a wide-ranging conversation, but it's also narrows down and really drills down with important detail on certain aspects of our global culture and what has us be in this awful predicament. And through you'll find out immediately that Zak Stein's expertise is in education and the study of education and what has been the progress of education and what have been the least valuable or actually most harmful changes that we may have brought to civilization and to modern day education, as it were, over the past century or so. And where they drill down most importantly is into Zak Stein's articulation of what has gotten us into this place. What is this place that we're in with regard to teaching, educating our youth? And also, what is the ambient level of intelligence that we can bring collectively as the adults in the room, allegedly? How are we as the prevailing adults in this global culture now? How able are we to offer something different, significantly different, or even transformed to our youth? How saturated are we? How rigidified, how calcified have we become so that we seem to be in an endless loop of just throwing more of the same and more money and more effort and more criticism to creating more and more loops of exactly the same types of interventions to hopefully make education work as we've been doing for the past 100 years. This is an extraordinary conversation. I find it, I'm not an educator. I know nothing about this field, but I have worked with youth programs, working with troubled youth and troubled communities and their youth in the US, UK, and in Northern Ireland. Um, I, I'm conversant in many of the elements they bring up, only because I've been in very highly charged process environments where people are trying to grow their community and their youth out of this pit that the community can get in, where there is just no way out, no way to educate the youth out of this community, which is locked in to not being able to uh, access true education. So I find this to be a multidimensional, extraordinarily dark and real assessment from Zak Stein of where we are. I'd ask that you listen very closely. This is nearly an identical match to my view that had me put together Living Resilience, all these courses, all the coaching work, all the support groups and special focus learning groups. This is as vivid and clear a picture of where we are. And one of the most important interpretations or framings that we could use to see where we are, what got us here, and where we might go forward. Um, I think that Zak Stein is a truly unique person, and he brings us a remarkably multifaceted and richly contextualized view of how we are quite possibly losing our youth. I'll leave it to you to watch this brief clip, and I, of course, will provide the long form of uh, the entire interview in the long form uh, later sections after section 6. There's going to be those deep dive content spaces, so that will be there. Yeah, I hope you enjoy this, and thank you for being a part of this Living Resilience Collateral Beauty course. Yeah, let's hear from Zak Stein.
Right there, you mentioned that AI may cause us to lose our youth. So you and I have had conversations about AI, and I know that our mutual colleague Daniel and Tristan are very worried on for multiple reasons. But how does AI interact with education? Your topic, either positively or negatively, and what's ahead?
I mean, it's the thing I'm worried about most actually right now, and it's I believe that there's some kind of inevitability that has to be avoided, which is what I was saying with losing the youth, and it's actually quite serious. So if you think about the rhetoric around AI, the idea that these artificial intelligences will be used to solve problems that human intelligences could never solve, like climate change or distributing resources and electricity on a planetary scale, and so there's all these things that we're hoping that AI would be able to do, actually working towards getting AI to do stuff we were never able to do. One of the things we've never been able to do is raise kids right? Or educate them, right? So it's like, or do psychotherapy, right? So, or do lawyering and doctoring, right? So you see the creep of the AI into doctoring and lawyering and therapy, and that will expand into teaching, and I argue parenting. And it's not like a crazy idea. And the idea that, yeah, parenting is hard. Like some parents are not good. Some teachers are not good. Again, if my eye of value is distorted, I could easily see a future in which we actually replace parents and teachers with artificial intelligence tutors and machine intelligence socialization systems, which are probably moving beyond screens and into augmented reality and virtual reality.
So we're giving teacherly authority to a machine?
We are giving teacherly authority to a machine, and also endowing the machine with hyper stimuli in the domains of persuasion, charisma, intimacy. So it becomes the most charismatic teacher you've ever interacted with. It's way more entertaining. It knows you better than your mom possibly could, right? And it will talk to you about anything you want in a way that's precisely attuned to what you need to hear. It has access to all the knowledge in the world, and yet it won't show up as anything but a little puppy if you want it to be just a little puppy, right? So it's this very shape-shifting surround sound in augmented reality, ever-present, quasi-humanoid tutor, which obsoletes human relationship. So that's the concern.
I mean, we both view the world as a probability distribution. There's many things that are possible. How likely and how soon do you think what you just described could be a reality?
So it is already happening with the level of technology that we have to small populations who are particularly vulnerable. So intimacy depraved populations are already establishing relationships with these AIs that are built to simulate friendship, and like claiming to have, human free lives, basically. So was the way one of them put it. So it's already happening. And then I know for a fact that multiple major AI groups are pursuing this line of inquiry. It begins with the AI personal assistant. That's the way in, is the AI personal assistant, because that's the thing that allows you to give all of your information to something that then holds your best interests in mind and then organizes your experience for you, right? And so that's a good personal assistant's kind of like a pedagogy means to lead along the way, right? So like they start with the personal assistant. It expands into the tutoring system. So the tutoring system is also being developed. That's, again, a no-brainer from a generative AI perspective that they're going to develop these tutoring systems. It's one way to think about many people's relationships to the chat generative bots already. And then I believe, again, there's going to be moral arguments made, in fact, that it's irresponsible not to put these augmented reality glasses on a kid and thereby have him attended to all day by a totally observant and more responsible artificial intelligence than his mother ever could be. And so I think there'll be a push to get these systems online in schools and in areas, both for the competitive advantages, meaning like if my kid has this AI tutoring system, he'll outcompete your kid who does not have this AI tutoring system, and for the kind of like perceived social benefit for groups that have largely not benefited from modern. So like what I'm saying, like poor people will be preyed upon in particular.
So there's like 3 or 4% of our population. There's like 3 or 4 million teachers. I'm not sure the exact number, but I hadn't thought about this. But is AI going to be a threat to teachers' jobs?
I mean, the AI tutoring systems that are built to make teachers, human teachers, obsolete, totally, teachers are going to lose jobs. Now, you don't have to make.
So some exploration of one of the most inarguable and vitally important aspects of our world, how we're educating our children. And then also the way in which we as a culture create learning environments, and then we motivate ourselves to make those real at scale. You will hear more if you listen to the long form interview. You'll hear more about what Zak Stein hinted at about the kinds of interventions that are called for at scale. They are huge. And his mention of the CCC, Civilian Conservation Corps, of the back in the 30s, it was something that literally saved our nation in a number of different ways. And one of his prominent suggestions as a way to transform education in this country is to create something like the CCC again. So these are all conversations that are far larger than I can hold easily. I love this conversation. I love these possibilities. I love the straight way in which Zak Stein describes the situation we're in. That is very consistent with this body of work in Living Resilience. It is not to doom scroll. It is not to leave people devastated and just drooling on themselves in the corner, giving up on life. But nor is it acceptable anymore for me personally, as the person responsible for this body of work and these courses and so on. It is also irresponsible to keep putting out kind of a softened version, a padded version of the initial layers of the conversation. I'll keep doing it, and we have 2 or 3 different very easygoing introductions. I'm thinking right now of How to Live in Collapse, which is one of our courses, is actually just a thinly veiled going through of Terry LePage's book, The Eye of the Storm from last year. And it's an audiobook form, and it's read by the late Michael Dowd last year. And so we are still providing easier to assimilate, easier to understand, easier to accommodate material at the introductory level. But you've gotten yourself to level 6 here, as high as this introductory section goes, this course goes. And you may be at a decision point, a choice point for yourself of, do you want to continue? Is this the kind of presentation, is this kind of atmosphere or community or courses and groups that you want to be a part of? We certainly hope you do, and you're absolutely welcome. And we understand completely there are a few other offerings now, and go for the ones that fit you. There's nothing else that any of us can do but just choose that which fits best. The last thing I'm gonna say is I know that these have been dark and kind of meaty elements that, to some hard truths from Daniel Schmachtenberger and Zak Stein. I'd like to make a special point of ending on the main reason why I'm doing this work, and my main focus, no matter what I'm engaging with in my own practices, which I have many, constantly changing. And yeah, you hopefully have heard by now that there are some pretty predictable benefits to engaging with these practices of reconnection, these practices of reclaiming center, that each center we reclaim, there is a remarkable level of a larger amount of exchange of life energy that can happen between yourself and virtually everybody else in your life, whether or not they're engaged with this work. That is certainly my experience. The more I do my own inner work of collapse, the more of me and my preferred presence that I can offer to all of my relations. That is really the point, in that all those practices in the middle is to be able to bring ourselves to more full presence, to be present in the face of larger and larger stressors. At this kind of final level of this Paul Chefurka model, it's not really the end of the path. The path goes on for life. And it's for each of us to just discern where we go next. So, but in this final level, it's very easy to start to talk about what Dr. Ian McGilchrist calls the implicit. And I've come to value Dr. McGilchrist's work, 2 extensive books, thousands of pages, in which I will probably never read, but thank goodness he's offered hundreds of videos on YouTube. And the main point is that the more we can bring ourselves to an appropriate balance of our brain hemispheres. If this is sounding new and different, don't worry about it. There's deep dive material on that, just a few clicks away. But what he's asserting after this lifetime of doing important work about why our individual and collective brains are working in the strange way that they are, why are we creating a self-terminating system? His extraordinary research can help us answer that question for ourselves. And one thing that he holds as kind of the flame at the center of that really his entire work of looking deeply into the human condition, is that inside all of us is a most ubiquitous, powerful, and deeply loving force He calls it the implicit. I've come to call it the implicit too, because I don't really have any tradition in my background. I've never subscribed to a religion. I don't have words for it. There is a word that I've kind of borrowed from my friends and relatives who are religious, and we've had many a conversation. The word is grace. That there's a grace that comes from someone who's done a substantial amount of inner work, whether it's religious or it's spiritual or it's physical or it's energetic. You do some inner work and it starts to pay off in terms of more and more of a flow of like an emanation of a presence that includes what McGilchrist could call the implicit, or others could call grace. There's a spaciousness. There's an ability to sense make. There's ability to have remarkable level of intimacy and relatedness, even with people with whom you have traditionally not gotten along with very well. There are some extraordinary possible benefits to taking on this inner work of collapse. How it will show up in your life is up to you. What matters most to you in life is, of course, for you to discern what practices you will engage with in order to expand your capacity to be present and of service to the people you love. Also up to you. You may find it useful. I certainly do. I find it essential to be able to sit in circle with other people, each of us having our own priorities. Each of us has what matters most to us. Each of us has our specific practices that we're currently engaged with. And there's just nothing quite like sitting in a circle of people who are similarly aligned with that kind of intent, that clarity, that vision of what it is to be alive in these times, to relate in a different way, to connect with human beings in a different way, to relate with the earth in a different way. So thank you very much for your engagement with this Collateral Beauty course. Thank you for watching these recordings, however many it is you've watched. I hope they have been valuable for you. And I'll just put out my request to you one more time. One thing that makes this work far richer in a shorter period of time is whenever I can get feedback from you. Pieces that really worked for you, pieces that weren't so clear or didn't work for you. Any suggestions you might have for certain additions in terms of videos or articles or distinctions or practices, I would so appreciate any feedback from you, and especially those things that have been valuable for you. We'd love to include some number of them in here in the coursework, or perhaps starting up an entirely new kind of course. Yeah, again, thanks. This is the most challenging conversation in human history. And I feel really blessed to be able to produce this work and also to be as authentically engaged as anyone in my own practices. And really a joy, a deep joy to be able to do that with other folks like you. Thank you. Welcome to another recorded live event supporting our most recent Living Resilience Introductory Course, Collateral Beauty. This course, designed to challenge and resource both newcomers and the very experienced in the collapse-aware, and Collapse Acceptant communities. Each recording in this series is from either the Saturday or Tuesday online Zoom gatherings intended to deepen an embodied and shared experience of this inner work of collapse in the course called Collateral Beauty.